It's strange how something as simple as a camera, a device meant to record reality exactly as it is, can sometimes capture things that don't seem to belong in that reality at all. Because security cameras don't imagine things, they don't feel fear, and they don't misinterpret shadows the way humans do. They just record what's there, exactly as it happens, without emotion, without bias, and that's what makes certain footage so unsettling. Because when something appears on camera that shouldn't be there, there's no easy way to explain it away. Tonight, I'm going to share three disturbing stories captured through security camera footage, moments that were recorded in real time, seen by people who couldn't ignore them or dismiss them as imagination. And these aren't just strange glitches or technical errors. These are the kind of recordings that leave people questioning what they saw long after the footage ends. The first story comes from a small convenience store that stayed open 24 hours a day, located in a quiet part of the city where very little happened at night, making it the kind of place where the late hours felt slow, predictable, and uneventful. The store had a basic security system, a few cameras placed around the aisles, one facing the entrance and another behind the counter, all connected to a monitor in a small office at the back. For years, nothing unusual had ever been recorded. Just normal footage of customers coming and going, employees restocking shelves, and long stretches of empty aisles during the early morning hours. But one night, something changed. It was around 2:17 a.m. when the footage later showed something strange happening in one of the back aisles, an area that usually remained empty at that time. The camera recorded a clear view of the aisle, shelves fully stocked, no movement, nothing out of place. And then, without any warning, one of the items on the shelf slowly shifted, not falling, not being pushed suddenly, just moving slightly forward on its own, as if something invisible had touched it. At first, it didn't seem like much. Something that could easily be ignored or explained. But then it happened again. Another item moved. Then another. Each movement small, controlled, and spaced out over several seconds, as if something was deliberately interacting with the objects one by one. When the employee on duty later reviewed the footage, he initially thought it might have been caused by vibrations or air pressure. Something logical, something explainable, but the longer he watched, the harder it became to accept that explanation. The movements didn't follow any pattern that made sense. And more importantly, they didn't stop. A few moments later, the camera captured something even more unsettling. At the far end of the aisle, just near the edge of the frame, a shadow appeared. Not a clear figure, not something fully visible, but a darker area that didn't match the lighting of the store. Something that seemed to shift slightly, even though nothing else around it moved. The employee paused the footage, zoomed in, and replayed it multiple times, trying to understand what he was seeing. But the shadow didn't behave like a normal shadow. It didn't stretch or change based on light. It stayed consistent, and then, as the footage continued, the shadow slowly moved further into the frame. At that point, the employee felt a growing sense of unease, something deeper than simple confusion, because whatever it wasn't attached to anything visible. There was no person, no object cast in it, nothing that could logically create that shape. And then, the camera behind the counter recorded something at the exact same time. The front door of the store, which had been closed, suddenly opened slightly. Not wide, not forced, just enough to create a small gap, as if someone had gently pulled it. But no one entered. No one stood outside. The entrance camera showed nothing. The door simply opened and stayed that way for a few seconds before slowly closing again on its own. When the employee realized that both cameras had recorded these events at the same time, the uneasiness turned into something much stronger. He rewound the footage again, watching both angles carefully, and that's when he noticed something he hadn't seen before. In the reflection of the glass door, just for a single frame, there was something standing inside the store, not in front of the camera, not clearly visible in the aisle, but only in the reflection. A shape, tall still, facing directly toward the camera. He paused the footage, his hand slightly shaking, and tried to zoom in, but the image was too distorted to make out any clear details. And when he played it again, the figure was gone. The rest of the footage showed nothing unusual. The store returned to complete stillness, as if nothing had happened. No alarms triggered, no further movement, just silence. The employee reported it to his manager, assuming there would be some explanation, some technical reason behind what he saw. But after reviewing the footage multiple times, no one could provide one. The cameras were functioning normally. There were no signs of tampering. No one had entered the store. And yet, something had clearly been there. The footage was eventually saved and reviewed again days later, but the more they watched it, the less it made sense. And what made it even more unsettling was that no one could explain why the movements in the aisle seemed so deliberate, so controlled, like whatever was there wasn't just passing through. It was aware of the space around it. The employee quit his job not long after that night, and to this day, he refuses to watch that footage again, because a part of him believes that what the camera captured wasn't just something unexplained. It was something that knew it was being recorded. Something that chose to reveal itself just enough to be seen, and then disappear before anyone could truly understand what it was. The second story comes from an apartment complex where a series of strange incidents were captured through the building's security cameras. A place that on the surface felt completely normal. A standard residential building with multiple floors, quiet hallways, and a basic CCTV system installed mainly for safety, with cameras covering the entrance, elevators, and each floor's corridor. For years, the system had only ever recorded routine activity, residents coming and going, late-night returns, deliveries, nothing out of the ordinary. Until one night, when something unusual was noticed by the building's night security guard while he was casually monitoring the live feeds. It was around 3:12 a.m. when he saw a woman standing in the hallway on the 7th floor, positioned directly in front of one of the apartment doors. At first, nothing seemed strange about it. People sometimes stepped out late at night, maybe for a call or fresh air, but what caught his attention was how still she was. She wasn't knocking. She wasn't using her phone. She wasn't moving at all. She was just standing there, facing the door, completely motionless. Minutes passed, and she didn't change position. The guard leaned closer to the monitor, watching carefully, waiting for some kind of movement. But there was nothing. The hallway lights remained steady, the camera feed clear, and yet the woman didn't react to anything around her. After about 5 minutes, a sense of unease began to settle in. It wasn't just that she was standing there. It was the way she was standing, perfectly still, as if she wasn't just waiting for someone, but fixed in place. The guard picked up his radio, considering whether to go check on her. But before he could make a decision, something changed. The woman slowly raised her hand. Not quickly, not naturally, but in a slow, controlled motion, until her hand rested against the apartment door. And then she stopped again. No knocking, no sound. Just her hand placed flat against the surface, as if she was feeling it. The guard frowned, his attention fully focused now. A strange feeling building in his chest as he continued watching. A few more seconds passed, and then the door suddenly opened from the inside. A man stepped out, clearly confused, looking directly at the woman as if he had just been disturbed. He said something, though the camera had no audio, and waited for a response. But the woman didn't react. She didn't turn her head. She didn't lower her hand. She remained completely still. The man hesitated, clearly unsettled, and then waved his hand in front of her face. No response. That's when his body language changed. He stepped back slightly, his posture stiffening, as if he was realizing something wasn't right. After a few seconds, he slowly closed the door again, locking it from the inside. The woman remained there, still, unmoving. The guard watched, now fully alert, unsure of what he was seeing, and then, without any warning, the camera feed flickered, just once. A brief distortion across the screen. When the image stabilized again, the woman was gone, not walking away, not stepping out of frame. Gone, completely. The hallway was empty. The guard immediately rewound the footage, his heart starting to race, and watched it again carefully, frame by frame. The woman had been there 1 second, and the next, she simply wasn't. No transition, no movement, nothing, just an empty hallway. At that point, the uneasiness turned into something much stronger. He switched to the other cameras, checking the elevator feed, the stairwell, the building entrance. But there was no sign of her anywhere. No one had left the floor. No one had entered or exited the building. It was as if she had never been there at all. The next morning, the guard reported the incident, and the building management decided to review the footage with the resident from that apartment. When the man saw the recording, his reaction was immediate. He became visibly uncomfortable, his expression changing as he watched the woman standing outside his door. After a few moments, he said something that made the situation even more unsettling. He told them that he hadn't opened the door because of a knock. He opened it because he heard someone whisper his name from the other side. The room went quiet. The footage clearly showed that the woman never spoke, never moved her mouth, never made any visible attempt to get his attention. And yet, he had heard something. The incident was never officially explained. Some believed it was a glitch in the camera system. Others assumed it was a person who somehow avoided being seen leaving. But no one could explain how she disappeared so suddenly, or why the resident heard something that the camera didn't capture. The guard continued working there for a few more weeks, but he stopped watching the monitors as closely as before, avoiding that particular camera whenever possible. Eventually he quit, and even now the footage remains saved in the system, rarely accessed, because those who have seen it don't focus on how the woman appeared. They focus on how she disappeared, without a single movement, without a single trace, as if whatever stood in that hallway that night was never meant to be seen for more than a moment. The third story comes from a security camera installed in a quiet parking lot behind a small office building, a place that during the day was usually filled with cars and people coming and going, but at night it became almost completely empty, lit only by a few dim streetlights that barely covered the far corners of the lot, leaving large sections in shadow. The camera itself was mounted high on the wall, angled downward to capture most of the area, and for years it had only ever recorded normal activity. Employees leaving late, occasional deliveries, nothing unusual, until one night when something was captured that no one could fully explain. It was around 2:48 a.m. when the footage showed a single car slowly pulling into the parking lot, its headlights cutting through the darkness as it moved towards the center of the frame. The car came to a stop. The engine remained running for a few seconds, and then the headlights turned off, leaving the entire area in dim, uneven lighting. A man stepped out of the car, closing the door behind him, and for a moment everything seemed completely normal. He looked around briefly, as if checking his surroundings, then walked a few steps away from the vehicle, heading toward the building entrance. But then he stopped, suddenly, without any clear reason. His posture changed slightly, his body stiffening as if he had noticed something. He slowly turned his head, looking toward the far end of the parking lot, into an area that the camera barely illuminated. At first, there was nothing there, just darkness. The man stood still, staring in that direction for several seconds, not moving, not reacting, just watching. And then, something appeared. At the very edge of the camera's view, where the light faded into shadow, a shape began to form. It wasn't clear at first, just a darker patch within the darkness, something that didn't match the stillness of the surroundings. The man didn't move. He kept staring, as if he could see it more clearly than the camera could. The shape didn't rush forward, didn't make any sudden movements. It simply stood there, barely visible, just enough to suggest that something was present. A few seconds passed, and then the man took a slow step backward. Then another. His movements were cautious, controlled, as if he didn't want to draw attention to himself. But the shape at the edge of the frame moved too, not quickly, not aggressively, but in a slow, deliberate way, matching his distance as if it was following him without fully stepping into the light. At that point, the tension in the footage became impossible to ignore. The man turned his body slightly, now clearly facing the direction of his car, and began walking back toward it, his pace gradually increasing. The shape followed, still distant, still partially hidden, but always there. The man reached his car, opened the door quickly, and got inside. His movements now rushed, his earlier calm completely gone. He started the engine immediately, the headlights turning back on, flooding the parking lot with light again, and for a brief moment, the shape was gone. The camera showed nothing but the empty space where it had been. The man didn't wait. He shifted the car into reverse, clearly trying to leave as fast as possible. But then something happened that made the footage even more disturbing. As the car began to move, the headlights swept across the parking lot. And for a single second, as the beam of light passed over the far corner, The shape appeared again, this time closer, much closer than before, close enough to be seen clearly for just a fraction of a moment. It wasn't fully defined, not detailed enough to describe, but it was tall, unnaturally still, and positioned in a way that didn't match how a person would normally stand. The man must have seen it too, because his reaction was immediate. The car stopped suddenly, just for a second, as if he had frozen in place. And then, without hesitation, he accelerated hard, the tires screeching slightly as he sped out of the parking lot and disappeared from the frame. The camera continued recording, the empty lot returning to silence. Nothing moving, nothing out of place. But then, a few seconds later, something else happened. At the far end of the frame, in the same area where the shape had first appeared, a shadow moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just a slow shift as if something was stepping back into the darkness. The footage ended there. When the video was later reviewed, the man who had been in the car was contacted and asked about what had happened that night. At first, he refused to talk about it, dismissing it as nothing. But eventually, after being shown the footage, he admitted something that made the situation even more unsettling. He said that when he stepped out of the car, he felt like someone was already there. Not heard, not seen clearly, but felt. And when he looked toward the darkness, he didn't just see a shape. He felt like it was already looking at him, waiting, watching. And when the headlights revealed it for that brief second, he realized something he couldn't explain. It hadn't just moved closer while he was backing away. It had already been closer than he thought the entire time. After that night, he never returned to that parking lot again. And the footage was saved, along with the others, labeled and archived, rarely watched, because those who have seen it don't focus on what the camera captured. They focus on what it implies, that whatever was standing there in the darkness that night wasn't just following him. It was letting him see it only when it decided he was close enough. And the most unsettling part about all of these recordings isn't just what was captured on camera. It's what connects them, because in every single case, the cameras were working exactly the way they were supposed to, recording real moments, real environments, real people. And yet, in those same recordings, something appeared that didn't seem to follow the same rules. A convenience store where objects moved without anyone touching them. An apartment hallway where someone stood still and then disappeared without a trace. A parking lot where something waited just beyond the light. 3 different places. 3 different nights, but the same feeling running through all of them. Something present, but not fully visible. Something that doesn't rush, doesn't panic, doesn't act randomly, but instead moves slowly, deliberately, as if it understands exactly when and how to be seen. And maybe that's what makes these moments more disturbing than they first appear, because security cameras don't imagine things. They don't misinterpret shadows. They don't feel fear. They just record what's there. Which means if something shows up on camera, even for a second, then for that moment, at least it was real. And maybe the question isn't why these things appear on camera. Maybe the question is why they don't appear more often. Because think about it. How many cameras are watching empty places right now? How many quiet hallways, dark parking lots, and silent rooms are being recorded every second? And how many of those recordings will never be watched closely enough to notice something small, something subtle, something that doesn't quite belong. It makes you wonder if these moments are rare or if they're simply unnoticed. Because in every one of these stories, there's one detail that stands out more than anything else. Whatever appeared didn't behave like something random. It didn't move chaotically. It didn't react with panic. It stayed calm, controlled, almost aware of the camera itself. And that raises a thought that's hard to ignore. What if these things don't just exist in those places? What if they know they're being recorded? What if they choose when to appear? And more importantly, when to disappear? Because in each case, the moment someone became aware of what they were seeing, the moment the attention shifted from normal to focused, it was gone, not fading away, not leaving the frame, just gone, as if it had already decided how long it would stay before anyone even noticed it. And maybe that's the part that stays with people the most, not just what they saw, but what it suggests. That whatever was captured in those recordings wasn't sluchino, wasn't accidental. It was intentional, observing, waiting, and revealing itself just enough to be remembered, but never enough to be understood. So, the next time you walk past a security camera, or find yourself in a place where you know you're being recorded, take a moment and think about it. Not about what the camera sees clearly, but about what it might capture when no one is watching. Because sometimes, the most disturbing things aren't the ones caught in plain sight. They're the ones that only appear when everything else is quiet. And by the time you notice them, they might already be gone.